Matthew had only come to clear the plates, nothing more. He moved like clockwork through the echo of linen and silver, the low clink of glassware still humming in the back of the ambassador's residence. The air was too still that night, the kind of stillness that doesn't feel earned, like a silent spot at the cost of something sacred. The state dinner had just ended. Laughter had drained from the walls. And while polished shoes and political promises exited through the front, Matthew walked quietly through the kitchen door and whispered something in Russian. No one was near him. No one should have heard him, but the ambassador 3 rooms away, behind 2 doors and a translator, suddenly stood frozen, mid-conversation, like someone had jammed a knife between his thoughts. You're not imagining this. I know how it sounds. A dishwasher muttering to himself, shouldn't matter. And yet, the ambassador, a man trained to ignore chaos, went pale like he'd seen the ghost of someone who never should have followed him here. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at nothing while the interpreter called his name. That's when something cracked. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else would notice. But if you've ever felt reality truly bend, you know. That sound is not external, it's inside you, right behind your ears, like something opening. This part was never in the official report. Hell, most people don't even know the dishwasher existed. Matthew wasn't logged on the employee roster. The catering company had no record of hiring him. When they played the footage back, the kitchen cameras showed every plate being lifted, every tray being polished by invisible hands. No one was there, just the plates floating, moving like someone half in this world. Only one camera caught his face briefly when he looked up at the security lens in the east corridor, and I swear to you, in that single frame, his eyes were too old, not tired, ancient, like they remembered something you and I were never meant to touch. This file wasn't meant to be viewed. And if you're still here, it's probably already too late, because here's the part that keeps me from sleeping. The word he whispered in Russian. It wasn't a word, it was a name, and no one's been able to translate it because it doesn't exist in any language. But last month, a baby born in Kansas muttered it during her first cry. That's not the part that scared the doctors. What scared them is that her grandmother, who died during childbirth in 1963, had said the exact same sound moments before flatlining. The nurse on duty, she was the ambassador's daughter, and now she's missing. I watched the footage again, frame by frame, thinking maybe I'd see something different this time. Maybe some trick of the eye, a lighting artifact, a stray reflection that would explain how a full tray of champagne glasses lifted itself and glided across the table like someone was still holding it. But no matter how many times I paused or stared too long at the corners of the screen, the truth stayed the same. There wasn't anyone there, just glass moving like it knew where to go. And that damn whisper, buried so low in the audio feed, it made your teeth itch like something alive crawling just under the decibel floor. The tech guy, he was the first to say it out loud, though he half laughed like he didn't want to believe himself. You ever get that feeling? He asked me, not looking up, like you're watching someone watching you. I didn't respond, because the moment he said it, the silence in the room felt full, not loud, not heavy, full, like someone else was listening for a reaction. That whisper again, distorted through layers of static, bled faintly into the speakers, just enough to convince us it hadn't come from the footage at all. It sounded like it was leaking into the room now. It only got worse after I left the building. The next morning, I couldn't remember driving home. I was behind the wheel. The streets were familiar. The same pothole outside the gas station on 12th still thudded under my tire, but the actual ride, gone. No memory. Like someone cut it from the reel. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion. Maybe I was more shaken than I had allowed myself to admit. But then, as I unlocked my apartment, something slid under my door from the inside. A cassette tape. No note, just Matthew, written in shaky ballpoint ink. I don't even own a tape player. But my upstairs neighbor, Cheryl, collects old media reels, VHS, 8 tracks in. She always left her door half cracked open when she was home. I knocked once and held up the tape. She didn't say a word, just nodded slowly and let me in like she'd been waiting. Her living room smelled like photochemicals and mothballs. Every shelf filled with devices that looked like they belonged in some Cold War lab. As she fed the cassette into a dusty player, I felt that same static pressure in the room, the kind that sits behind your ears and waits. The tape didn't start with sound. It started with breathing. Not fast, not slow, measured, human. Then the voice came, crackling through distortion, barely above a whisper. I've seen you before the dreaming started. It wasn't Russian, wasn't English either. The words were American, but the cadence wrong, like it had been stitched together from voices that didn't belong to one mouth. And then, layered beneath the voice, almost like a backmasking trick from an old record, there was another sound, a crying baby. Cheryl paused the tape, trembling. I know that sound, she whispered. That cry. That's my daughter's. I recorded it the night she died. Her eyes didn't move from the player, but she never said a name. Not that name. She looked at me, then really looked, and I could tell she'd seen it too. The eyes, the static, the something. We sat in silence, but I felt it again, the sense that someone else was in the room, listening. recording us. The paranoia started. Like a slow leak, after that little things, my voicemail showed messages I never received. Recordings of me talking in my sleep, except the voice wasn't mine. It sounded like someone repeating my own words back to me in delay, like I was on a call with myself 20 minutes in the future. I played them for Ray. He didn't laugh this time. He just backed away from the speaker and said, "Your voice shouldn't be crying in that recording. Man, you didn't sound like that when I called you yesterday." But I remembered crying. I remember locking the bathroom door that night and just unraveling. So why did the water in the tub look completely still when I walked back in the next morning? No signs of the splashing, the pacing, the mirror fogged up with breath. Nothing, like I'd never even been there. That's when I met Grace. She claimed to be an archivist, some vague clipboard-carrying role that floated between national records and private collections. She looked sharp, clean, like someone who always carried a purpose in her pocket. But her eyes didn't match the rest of her. They darted too quickly, and when I asked her about Matthew, she said something that made me freeze. "Don't chase the man, chase the gap where he stood." At first, I thought it was metaphor, until I realized she wasn't talking about a person. She was talking about time. She handed me a documenta scan of an embassy service, scheduled from 1983. One column had been redacted, but faintly, through the smudges, you could make out a name. Same handwriting as the cassette. Same name the ambassador stopped breathing for. "How do you know this is real?" I asked. She just smiled like it was a sad joke and said, "You don't," and then she left. No last name, no contact, no trace of the conversation in my security logs. I checked. That night, the crying baby returned, this time from inside my apartment walls. I knocked, thinking maybe it was the neighbor downstairs. But when I pressed my ear to the wall, I didn't hear a baby anymore. I heard my own voice, whispering a name I didn't know, repeating it over and over like prayer, or a thread I set up my phone to record overnight just to prove I wasn't losing it. But in the morning, the video showed something I can't explain. I wasn't in bed, I was standing, eyes open, not sleepwalking, staring at the camera. No movement, no blinking, just a low hum under the audio. And then the voice, "I told you not to look for her," double quotes her, the ambassador's daughter, the one who vanished. I pulled every record I could find, court filings, family interviews, even the ambassador's own public statements. Nothing. She was wiped. No school records, no employment, not even a death certificate. As if she had been erased. Retroactively, like she never existed to begin with. But someone forgot to erase her memory from the people who knew her. And Cheryl gone. I went back upstairs, and the door was bolted from the inside. Her apartment, empty, dustless, not even a coffee stain. Like someone rebuilt the room from memory, but didn't remember enough details to make it real. Only thing left was the tape player, playing that same breath over and over. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I'm breaking down or waking up, because the worst part isn't the recordings or the missing time. It's this dream I keep having. If it is a dream, I'm walking down a corridor lined with doors. Each one has a number, but no handles. I stop at one marked -11, and I hear the name again. That name that doesn't exist. I press my hand to the door, and it opens not by touch, but like it knew I was ready. And inside, across the room, standing under a red light, is me, older, hollow, whispering, "You shouldn't have remembered this." And every time I wake up, something small is different in my apartment. A framed photo flipped backwards. My toothbrush soaking wet, though I haven't used it yet. My computer playing static at 3:13 a.m. sharp. Grace sent me one last file before she vanished. An audio spectrogram of the whisper. When analyzed visually, it shows coordinates, a location in Alaska, a long-abandoned military station decommissioned in 1989. No one's allowed in. No records online. The name of the station, Project Enoch, and here's where the line shatters completely. The ambassador was born at that base. So was Matthew. So was Grace. And I wasn't. At least ... Not yet. Ask ChatGPT. I thought I'd found the answer when I got to the coordinates in Alaska. The journey. There was a blur of ice-slick roads and disoriented silence. I don't even remember booking the flight. The emails were there. Sure, the confirmation, the rental car invoice, but the memory of it, the decision itself, felt like something someone else had done while wearing my skin. And yet, there I was, standing on a cracked tarmac surrounded by wind that didn't carry snow, or sound, just emptiness. The kind of cold that feels older than weather, like the atmosphere had been drained decades ago and never truly replaced. The facility, Project Enoch, wasn't what I expected. No concrete towers, no fences humming with electricity, just a forgotten bunker buried in a frozen ridge. The lock had long since rusted shut, but the door opened without resistance, like something inside had been waiting. The air was stale, but not dead. I could feel the pressure shift when I stepped inside, as if the walls recognized me. That's not paranoia. I mean it literally. Every time I turned, a vent would hiss softly, a pipe would creak once, almost in rhythm with my steps, as if the building breathed with me. I expected Cold War relics. Dusty monitors, thick folders stamped confidential, a static-laced reel of whatever experiment they'd buried here. What I found instead was worse. A nursery, half collapsed but unmistakable, pale yellow paint flaking off the walls. Faded decals of moons and stars curling at the corners. A rocking chair, rotted but intact, sat in the center, and carved into the back of it, like someone had scratched it in with shaking hands, was one word: Grace. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Names repeat. It didn't mean anything, but then I opened the drawer under the chair and pulled out a cassette, labeled, in the same hand as the last one, Session -11. I didn't have a player on me, but the room had one wired into the wall, still powered, still warm. I pressed play, and the static that greeted me wasn't random, it was familiar. My voice, older, tired, but unmistakably me. You're not ready. You think you are, but the timeline hasn't collapsed yet. Second voice, female, breathy, shaking. You said this would fix it, that if I brought him here, it would hold. Me again. It doesn't hold, it only loops. The recording distorted then like someone dragging metal across vinyl, screeching, shattering, and beneath it all, a third voice barely audible, not human, not language, a rhythm, clicking, breathing, pulsing, as if something had been listening through the walls, not for sound, for agreement, for recognition. I should have left right then. Burned the place, crushed the tape, walked back into the cold and forgotten this ever happened. But I didn't, because something clicked inside me when I heard that pulse, like a lock turning in my chest. It wasn't my first time there. I remembered a hallway longer than it should have been, sloped slightly downward, lights flickering in sequence as I passed, and I remembered being smaller, younger, carried maybe, a figure walking ahead, dragging something heavy, and a phrase whispered just behind my left ear. We need you to forget this part. It came like a flood then, half memory, half dream, being led into a room with mirrored walls, asked to point at images on a screen. Faces I didn't know but reacted to, my heart racing when I saw one woman's off features, sad eyes and me crying before I understood why. Her name never spoken aloud, but I felt it. Beneath the skin, etched in the quiet behind my teeth, Grace Epp. In this memory, I wasn't her son, I was her replacement, a test, a reset. That was the lie they told. That this program, this place, was built to help preserve memory, store trauma for future generations to avoid. But what they really did was fracture identity. Copy pieces of people and try to rewrite them, drop them into new lives like tape spliced together in the dark. That's when the false resolution hit, the elegant little lie that almost let me walk out satisfied. It was a psychological experiment, a rogue memory project. Nothing supernatural, just unethical science. Doc, I could live with that. I could tell myself I was a subject, nothing more. A product of grief studies and repressed trauma modeling. I could even believe the static was just old recordings bouncing off aging circuits. Until I saw the photograph taped to the back of the nursery door, water damaged and curling at the edges. Me, as a child, standing next to the ambassador, smiling. Behind us, Grace, holding a clipboard dated March 3, 1997, the year before I was born. I stared at it for what felt like hours, the skin on my arms buzzing like it wanted to peel away, because if that photo was real, it meant two impossible things. I had been here before I existed, and I had already met the people I thought I was investigating. The lie collapsed, and something shifted in the room. The temperature dropped. The walls tightened. That presence, the one I'd felt since the first whisper, no longer lingered outside perception. It stepped forward, not physically, not as a form, but as recognition, a deep internal knowing that the thing watching me hadn't just been following the investigation, it had caused it, fed it, timed every coincidence, every lost hour, every distorted tape. It had looped this before, not to study me, but to soften me, to prepare. The danger wasn't the experiment. The danger was that I had been the control group, the subject, allowed to age outside the system to see how long it would take before I returned on my own, before I'd seek out what they tried to bury. And worse, how many others I'd bring with me by telling this story. You feel it too. Don't you? The sense that you've heard this before, that some part of this Alaska, the missing woman, the crying baby, the mirrored door feels like a dream you forgot you had, a conversation you almost remember, a name you can't say out loud but feels warm in your mouth. That's the point. That's how it spreads. Before I left the facility, I found one last tape buried under a loose tile in the floor. No label, just a thin red thread wrapped around it, tied in a loop. I played it. A voice again, mine older still, ragged, sincere. If you found this, it means the story worked, but you need to stop now. You need to let them forget, because if they remember, if they all remember, it comes through. The audio glitched to not just distortion, like the sound peeled itself backward through time, then silence, but not total. Beneath the silence, if you turn the gain high enough, there's still breathing, and just once only, once you hear the name. Yours. I didn't realize I wasn't alone until the third tape played itself at 2:13 a.m. up, time that had begun to reappear everywhere. The flicker on my microwave when the power blinked. The page number torn from a library book I never borrowed. The gas station receipt someone else left in my coat pocket. 2:13, always 2:13. And this time, when the tape began, no play button pressed. No hands near the recorder. It wasn't my voice, it wasn't Grace's, it was someone else entirely. Calm, measured, and painfully awake. The voice of someone who'd been watching this play out for far longer than I had. You've heard it, haven't you? The whisper behind the glass. The voice buried in your name. Don't ignore it. You were right all along. And then a pause, long enough to make me think it was over. But it continued. There are others. We've been watching you. Because you're the only one who's broken pattern this far. We don't speak out loud. We don't write in ink. We leave symbols, glitches, things that flicker when no one else sees. You're not the first to reach the end, but you might be the first. To turn back, that was when I noticed it. On the far wall, projected from nothing barely visible unless the room was completely darker shape. Circular, etched with 6 intersecting lines. Like a compass crumpled in on itself. I'd seen it before. Once in the reflection of a subway window, another time in the grain of a wood table at a diner in Utah I couldn't remember driving to. Every time it appeared, I felt it pull at something in my chest. Like it wanted to be remembered, but not understood. A symbol. The others were using it to communicate. I found the next message carved into the condensation on my bathroom mirror. Not with fingers, but with absences if the moisture refused to touch that part of the glass. A sentence that hadn't been there when I stepped into the shower, but was waiting when I got out. Watch the sky at 2:13. It blinks. That night, I did. I stood in the middle of my apartment's parking lot with my phone pointed upward. And when the clock hit the mark, the stars, dozens of them, shifted. Not moved, shifted. Like a filter had dropped for just a second, and behind the familiar canopy was a second layer. A map, a set of coordinates arranged in blinking starlight. I thought it was madness. Sleep deprivation. After all, who do you trust when your own senses start turning against you? Then the emails started. Not to me. To Her Grace, I found her laptop in a file archive tied to a decommissioned federal storage account. Something no one should have been able to access. But the password wasn't random. It was my birthday, not the one on my IDTH. There were 46 unsent emails in her drafts folder, all written to an address that didn't exist anymore. All timestamped at exactly 2:13 a.m., every message different, but each ending with the same phrase. We are starting to remember you. And, in the margins of each email, tucked between lines of normal language, there were strange characters, half-letters, inverted commas, spacing anomalies. I printed one out and held it under UV light, just on a whim. The hidden shapes formed the same compass-like symbol, always pointing downward. Not north, not to earth, inward, someone or something was planting memories inside us, not full events, just impressions, reactions, familiarity where none should exist. I spoke to a trucker in Wyoming who said he dreamt of my voice before we met. A woman in Tallahassee told me she saw me in a found footage reel from 20 years ago, grainy, black and white, me standing in the background of a hospital hallway, face turned toward a mirror I don't remember looking into. Every story ended the same way. The memory vanished when they tried to record it, but they all remembered the symbol. Always the symbol. That's when the observer came forward. He didn't give a name, just a location, a booth in an abandoned movie theater on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. Ask for the film with no title, he said. They'll know. I shouldn't have gone. I know that now, but I did. And when I walked into that dark, dead theater, the only person there was a man with a lantern and a stitched-together face, SCARS, tracing lines that didn't match the contours of his bones. Like someone had tried to recreate a face from memory and gotten it just slightly wrong. You're late, he said, without turning around. I wasn't invited, I replied. He smiled at the projector. You were recorded. He showed me a reel, no label, no leader, just static and flicker and spliced together images that hit the brain like a panic attack. A field, a body, a door that opened the wrong direction. My childhood home, except the furniture was reversed and the windows looked out onto places I've never lived. And then a figure, not me, but familiar, wearing my clothes, repeating lines from my memories in the wrong order. Like a bad dub of a life I thought was mine. They've been scripting you, the man said, giving you a sense of freedom. Testing which versions of you break compliance. You were never meant to reach Alaska. That part wasn't written yet. Who are they? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a piece of black film. This is the real beginning, he said. You didn't remember it because they redacted your mind. What am I supposed to do with it? Burn it, he said, or worse, watch it. But either way, don't let them play the ending. When I got home, I tried to ignore it, threw the strip in a drawer, but that night, I dreamed in reverse. Every sound, every word spoken backwards, every movement unnatural and jerking. In the dream, I was screaming, but it came out as laughter. And when I looked in the mirror, My reflection didn't copy. MIT moved first. I woke up at 2:13. The film strip was lying on my pillow. That's when I knew. This wasn't about memory loss. It was about memory placement. Every truth I'd clung to, my birthday, my childhood, my name, it had all been installed, like software. And the observer, the man in the booth, was one of the last who remembered the preload, the original script, before it was overwritten. There are others like me. We see each other now. On subway platforms, in reflections that last too long, in security camera stills that glitch just enough to let another face peek through. We don't speak, we don't need to. The symbol is enough. Drawn in condensation, etched in fog, lit up in the way a street lamp flickers when no one's under it. You're not crazy. They lied to you, and if you're still watching, still reading, chances are they're watching you, too. Not to stop you, not yet, but to time you. To measure how long it takes for the memory to settle and take root. Because once you remember the symbol, once it feels like it's always been there, you're in. No going back. This is no longer a story about a dishwasher, or an ambassador, or even me. It's about what's underneath it all. The buried architecture of identity. The installed beliefs. The ones they made you forget you forgot. And the one thing that twists it all. Just as you think you understand. That third voice on the tape. It wasn't mine. It was yours. It had never really been about the dishwasher, or the whisper, or the tapes. The closer I got to the center of it, the more I realized none of those were the mystery. They were symptoms. Fractures in a deeper design. Clues left by those who had already given up trying to explain it in words. It was never about what happened to me. It was about why it was allowed to happen. About the thing beneath memory that no one wants to name. The part of being human that wants to be rewritten. And now, I was standing in front of the door again. Not in Alaska this time. Not in any physical place I could trace on a map. This door was in the space behind thought, that quiet hum before a memory forms. I couldn't tell you how I got there. Only that I had been here before. Over and over. In dreams, in slips of déjà vu. In the pause between hearing your name and remembering it belongs to you. The door had no handle. It never did. Only that symbol etched deep, leading light like something underneath was straining to get out. And behind it, I could feel a choice waiting. I remembered Grace then, not as a stranger. Not as a ghost, but as something more painful. A friend, a sister, a truth I had known but couldn't hold. Her voice returned to me, not in whispers but in emotion. A warmth, a weight, something I had once promised to protect. She had tried to warn me, not just with files and tapes, but with something older, grief. All those nights I had cried without reason. The dreams I woke from shaking, they weren't reactions to trauma, they were remnants of her. Because somewhere, long before I had a name, before I had skin, or time, or choice, I had made a promise to her. And breaking it is what allowed this to begin. I remembered the trial now, the original test. They had asked us, who do you want to be? And I had answered the way I thought they wanted me to. They gave me a story, a face, a role to play. But the truth I had asked to forget, and now, the system was offering the same question again. One last loop, one final chance. One could choose to believe that all of this was just memory manipulation, neural reprogramming, a failed experiment in manufactured identity. I could bury it again, go back to sleep, return to a life with edges that held firm. I could open the door, but I knew what it would cost me, because on the other side wasn't an answer. It was who I was before the story began, and becoming that again would mean letting go of everything I'd called real. I collapsed, not physically, but internally, like a collapse of ego, of resistance, of armor. I wept not from fear, but recognition, a soul-deep grief that came from realizing I had never been a victim here. I had been complicit. Every glitch, every skipped memory, every voice that echoed in my dreams, I had agreed to it. I had helped write this, and that's the part that tore me open. Not the memory, the responsibility. Because suddenly, I understood why they all vanished. Why Cheryl disappeared. Why Grace let go. Why the observer never gave a name. It wasn't to escape the system. It was because once you remember who you are really, you can't stay in the story anymore. You become something else. Not better, just awake. So I opened the door, and there was nothing. No light, no form, no voice calling me forward. Just a stillness so absolute it felt alive. And in that stillness, I saw you, not as a stranger, but as another fracture in the system. Another memory drifting toward awareness. You've felt it, haven't you? The pull, the chills you can't explain. That moment when you look in the mirror and the reflection stares too long. The reason you paused this video once and swore you heard your name whispered behind your ear. The reason this story feels familiar, not because you've heard it before, but because you helped write it. That's why it happened. Because part of us wanted it too. Not for answers, but to remember we were never supposed to need them. We were the ones who built the walls, hid the tapes, whispered the name in the baby's ear. We looped ourselves to protect what couldn't survive the light. And now, the loop is breaking. The question isn't whether it's real. The question is, what happens to the dreamer when they finally wake up? You're waking up, aren't you? Even now, you can feel it. behind your ribs, in the flicker of the screen, in the name you still can't say out loud. You're closer than you think, but some part of you already knew that. Because the most dangerous truths aren't hidden in shadows, they're buried in familiarity. And if you're still here, if the story hasn't rejected you yet, then maybe you're ready to remember the rest. Or maybe, like me, you've been remembering all along. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found. Ask ChatGPT.